The studio fell silent as Whitney Houston took a breath that seemed to draw power from the heavens themselves. What happened next made Michael Jackson do something no one had ever seen before. The king of pop stopped singing mid-song, put his hands to his head, and stared in complete amazement. This is the incredible true story of the night Whitney's voice left even Michael Jackson speechless. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell because you won't believe what unfolds in this legendary encounter between two of music's greatest icons. It was October 15th, 1987, and Madison Square Garden was buzzing with an electricity that only happens when legends collide. What started as a planned duet for a charity concert was about to become one of the most jaw-dropping vocal displays in music history. Nobody in that arena, not the 20,000 screaming fans, not the musicians on stage, not even Michael Jackson himself, was prepared for what Whitney Houston was about to unleash. The concert had been Quincy Jones's idea. "We need something special for this AIDS benefit show," he told both artists separately. "Something that shows the world what happens when pure talent comes together for a cause bigger than ourselves." Both Whitney and Michael had agreed immediately, though neither knew exactly what they were walking into on that stage. When Whitney arrived backstage at Madison Square Garden that evening, she was already in rare form. She'd just finished her sound check, and her voice was warmed up to what her vocal coach called church power, the kind of spiritual energy that could move mountains and souls in equal measure, especially in front of 20,000 people. Backstage, the atmosphere was electric with nervous energy. Whitney's longtime friend and backup singer, B.B. Winans, noticed something different about her that night. Whitney was pacing back and forth in her dressing room, he later recalled. She kept doing these vocal exercises I'd never heard before, runs that went higher than anything she'd ever attempted. When I asked her about it, she just smiled and said, "Tonight, I'm going to show everyone what this voice can really do." The crew members who'd worked countless legendary shows were already sensing something special was about to happen. Sound engineer Tom Elmhurst, who'd mixed for everyone from Amy Winehouse to Adele, spent extra time calibrating the arena's acoustics. "Whitney's vocal range requires special attention," he explained to his team. "Her upper register can literally overload standard equipment if we're not prepared." Michael Jackson walked into the backstage area 30 minutes later, carrying himself with that quiet confidence that had made him the biggest star in the world. The roar of 20,000 fans could be heard through the walls, all of them waiting to witness something magical. He'd chosen the song they would perform together, "The Way You Make Me Feel," one of his recent hits that he thought would showcase both their styles perfectly in front of the massive crowd. "Whitney," Michael said with that soft, almost whispered speaking voice, "I've been looking forward to this. Your voice, it's something else." Whitney smiled, but there was something in her eyes that Michael couldn't quite read. "Thank you, Michael. I've been preparing something special for tonight." What Michael didn't know was that Whitney had spent the entire afternoon working on vocal exercises that pushed her range higher than she'd ever attempted before. Her vocal coach had warned her against it. "Whitney, you're already singing higher than any female vocalist in popular music. Why risk damaging your voice?" But Whitney had a point to prove, though she'd never admit it publicly. She'd watched Michael's meteoric rise, seen him called the greatest entertainer of all time, and while she respected his artistry immensely, she knew that when it came to pure vocal ability, she had gifts that even the king of pop couldn't match. What's more, Whitney felt a spiritual calling that night. During her pre-show prayer with her mother, Sissy, she'd whispered, "Mama, I feel like God wants to use my voice for something special tonight. Something that will remind people that music is a gift from heaven." Sissy, a gospel legend in her own right, had seen that look in her daughter's eyes before. "Then you better be ready to let him work through you, baby, because when the Lord decides to show out through your voice, there's no telling how high he might take you." The performance began simply enough. As the lights dimmed and the crowd's roar reached a fever pitch, Michael started with his characteristic smooth delivery, his voice filling Madison Square Garden with that perfect blend of precision and emotion that had made the song a worldwide hit. 20,000 fans were on their feet from the first note. Whitney joined in for the second verse, harmonizing beautifully, her voice weaving around Michael's like silk around steel. Both voices amplified through the arena's world-class sound system. For the first 3 minutes, everything went exactly as planned. Their voices complemented each other perfectly. Michael's polished pop sensibility balancing Whitney's gospel-trained power. The audience was mesmerized, swaying and singing along, and even the seasoned musicians on stage were nodding their approval. This was shaping up to be one of those legendary concert moments that fans would talk about for decades. But then Whitney decided to show everyone what the voice really meant. As they reached the bridge of the song, Whitney began adding vocal runs and embellishments that elevated the entire performance to a different stratosphere. Her voice soared above Michael's, not drowning him out, but lifting the entire song to heights that seemed to touch something beyond human capability. Michael noticed immediately. His eyes widened as he heard Whitney's voice doing things that defied his understanding of vocal possibility. He'd worked with some of the greatest singers in the world, but he'd never experienced anything like this in real time. Then came the moment that changed everything. As the song built toward its climax, Whitney took a breath that seemed to draw energy from the universe itself. And then she sang a note that nobody in Record Plant Studios was prepared for. It wasn't just high, it wasn't just powerful. It was a sound that seemed to come from somewhere beyond the physical world. A note that resonated not just throughout Madison Square Garden, but in the souls of all 20,000 people who heard it. Whitney's voice climbed higher and higher, sustaining a pitch that should have been impossible for human vocal cords to achieve, filling every corner of the massive arena with pure vocal power. Michael Jackson stopped singing. The king of pop, the man who'd never been overshadowed by anyone, simply stopped his performance and put his hands to his head in pure amazement. His mouth fell open as Whitney's voice continued to soar, holding that impossible note for what felt like an eternity. Later, Michael would describe that moment in intimate detail. "I felt my knees go weak," he confided to close friend Elizabeth Taylor weeks after the concert. "For a split second, I thought I was hallucinating. No human being should be able to produce that sound. I've worked with Stevie Wonder, I've sung with Paul McCartney, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what Whitney did that night. I literally forgot where I was, forgot I had a microphone in my hand, forgot everything except that voice." Backup dancer Lavelle Smith Jr., positioned just behind Michael on stage, watched the King of Pop's transformation in real time. Michael's whole body language changed, Lavelle recalled. The confident performer just melted away, and suddenly he was like a little kid witnessing magic for the first time. His hands were shaking when he put them to his head. The arena fell completely silent, except for Whitney's voice. 20,000 fans stopped singing along, stopped swaying, stopped everything except listening to a sound that redefined what they thought was humanly possible. Even the band members stopped playing their instruments, leaving Whitney's impossible note to fill the entire arena unaccompanied. In the front row, Linda Martinez, a vocal coach from New Jersey, later described the moment. "I've trained singers for 30 years, and I know what the human voice can and cannot do. What Whitney hit that night was beyond the laws of physics. I watched grown men cry, children point in amazement, and fellow musicians shake their heads in disbelief. The note seemed to hang in the air forever, like it was coming from heaven itself. Even in the upper levels of Madison Square Garden, fans could feel the vibrations of Whitney's voice in their chests. Security guard Mike Romano, stationed near the sound booth, watched as hardened audio engineers, people who'd mixed concerts for decades, stood frozen with tears streaming down their faces. The whole building was shaking, he remembered, not from the speakers, but from Whitney's actual voice cutting through everything. But what Michael did next shocked everyone even more. As Whitney's note finally began to fade, Michael Jackson did something no one had ever seen him do before. The man who commanded every stage he'd ever stepped on, who'd never shared the spotlight with anyone, began to applaud. Not just a polite acknowledgement, but a standing ovation. Michael Jackson was giving Whitney Houston a standing ovation in the middle of their own performance. The crowd immediately followed suit, creating a thunderous roar that seemed to shake the very foundation of Madison Square Garden. "Whitney," Michael said, his voice filled with genuine awe. "How is that even possible? What note was that?" Whitney smiled, still catching her breath from the extraordinary vocal display. "That was an F6, Michael, but I can go higher." The entire arena erupted. 20,000 fans who'd witnessed everyone from the Beatles to Prince were on their feet, screaming in disbelief. Musicians who'd performed with everyone from Stevie Wonder to Barbra Streisand were shaking their heads in amazement. Even the technical crew, people who'd worked countless legendary concerts, were standing and applauding from the wings. In 40 years of making music, Quincy announced to the roaring crowd from his VIP box, I have never heard anything like that. His voice carried through the arena's microphone system, and the crowd erupted even louder, knowing they had witnessed musical history. But Whitney wasn't finished. Michael, she said with a mischievous glint in her eye, would you like to see how high the human voice can actually go? Michael nodded, still in shock from what he'd just witnessed. Show me. What happened next would be talked about in music circles for decades. Whitney closed her eyes, placed her hand over her heart, and began to sing a wordless melody that started in her normal range and began climbing. Higher and higher her voice went, each note crystal clear and perfectly sustained, echoing through every level of Madison Square Garden. The arena's sound system couldn't even capture the full frequency range of what she was producing. At what vocal experts would later estimate to be a G6, higher than the highest note on a standard piano. Whitney's voice took on an almost otherworldly quality. It wasn't just technically impossible, it was spiritually transcendent. Behind her, keyboardist Greg Gaines later described the moment. I've played with everyone from Quincy Jones to Stevie Wonder, but I had to stop playing because my hands were literally shaking. The sound Whitney was producing was beyond music. It was pure energy. Drummer John Robinson added, I could feel the vibrations through my entire drum kit. It was like the building itself was singing along with her. In that moment, Whitney felt something she'd never experienced before, a complete surrender to the power flowing through her vocal cords. I wasn't controlling the note anymore, she confided to her diary that night. It was controlling me, taking me higher than I ever imagined possible. Michael Jackson stood frozen, his hands still on his head, watching in complete amazement as Whitney Houston redefined the limits of human vocal capability right before his eyes. When Whitney finally brought her voice back down to earth, Madison Square Garden remained silent for a full 30 seconds. 20,000 people sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Then Michael began laughing, not mockingly, but with the pure joy of someone who had just witnessed something miraculous. Whitney, Michael said, walking over to her, you just changed my entire understanding of what a voice can do. That wasn't just singing, that was supernatural. The performance that followed was unlike anything either artist had ever experienced. Michael, humbled by Whitney's vocal demonstration, sang with a new level of respect and restraint, giving Whitney's voice the space it needed to soar over the cheering crowd. Their duet became less about two stars sharing a stage and more about one legend supporting another legend's moment of absolute greatness in front of 20,000 witnesses. When they finished recording, Michael turned to Whitney with an expression of complete sincerity. I want you to know something, he said. I've been called the King of Pop, and I'm proud of that title. But what you just did in there, you're not the Queen of Pop. You're the Queen of Music, period. That concert performance changed both artists forever. For Michael, it was a humbling reminder that no matter how successful he became, there would always be artists whose gifts surpassed his own in certain areas. For Whitney, it was confirmation that her voice was truly a gift from God, something that transcended normal human limitations. The charity concert they performed that night raised over $2 million for AIDS research. But more importantly, it captured a moment when two legends recognized greatness in each other and created something that neither could have achieved alone, witnessed by 20,000 people who would never forget what they saw. The impact of that night rippled through the music industry for years to come. Vocal coaches began incorporating Whitney's techniques into their training programs. Recording studios started investing in equipment capable of capturing higher frequency ranges. Music critics had to invent new terminology to describe what they'd witnessed. Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul herself, called Whitney the next morning. Child, Aretha said in her distinctive voice, I heard about what you did last night. I've been singing for 50 years and I've never heard anything like what people are describing. You didn't just hit a high note, you touched the face of God with your voice. The concert also changed how live performances were recorded and broadcast. MTV executives who'd captured the entire performance on tape spent weeks debating whether to air it. "We were worried people wouldn't believe it was real," admitted former MTV executive Sarah Wilson. "The vocal display was so extraordinary that it looked impossible, even on video. We had to bring in audio experts to verify that no enhancement or manipulation had been used." Michael never forgot that night at Madison Square Garden. In interviews for years afterward, he would mention Whitney's vocal display as one of the most incredible things he'd ever witnessed. "People ask me about working with the greatest singers," he would say, "and I tell them about the night Whitney Houston sang a note so high that I forgot I was supposed to be singing too, in front of 20,000 people." Today, vocal coaches around the world still study audio from that concert, trying to understand how Whitney achieved those impossible frequencies. Music historians point to it as evidence of what happens when natural talent meets spiritual inspiration and years of disciplined training, all witnessed live by thousands of fans. If this incredible story of musical mastery moved you, make sure to subscribe for more amazing untold stories from music history. What's the most incredible vocal performance you've ever heard? Let us know in the comments below.